If you just got done watching the video, I'm Brandon's mom. One thing that I can tell you about Brandon is definitely a mama's boy. When Brandon joined the military and went to boot camp, it was probably the first time he had been away from me for more than a week. Brandon got deployed within 3 or 4 months and was gone for about 13 months. When he first came home, I could tell that he was different. But my husband kept saying, you have to realize that when he left, he was a boy and now he's a man. So when he first started drinking, I just thought it was because of his age and some of the stuff that he had been through. I didn't realize that he was drinking as much as he was. The night of the accident, for some reason, my husband was home from work. We had 2 young grandkids at the time. We had went out to dinner. And at dinner, my husband ordered a pitcher of beer. So now I have 3 kids I have to take care of. When we leave, of course, I'm the one driving. Brandon passed us on the road. And my husband's like, follow him. And I was like, follow him for what? It's like, I want to go with him. I'm like, I bet you do. But we have kids to put to sleep. I have to work in the morning. So we went home, put the kids to sleep. Next thing I remember is my alarm going off. I reached over to turn the alarm off, and my husband wasn't there. So I got up to go to the bathroom, and when I walked through the hallway, I could tell that my front door was open because of the street light coming in. And I looked, and my husband was standing in the doorway. And when I asked him what was wrong, he said, I don't know, something's going on outside. And the first thing I asked is if Brandon was home. He said no. So when I walked up to the door, I could see people out in the street. And I was like, well, I'm going out. So I go out the door. We had like a horseshoe driveway. So my car was in the front because I was supposed to be going to work. And my husband's truck was behind it. And when I walked past his truck, I noticed that Brandon's car was like half in the driveway, but half in the road. And the whole front end is caved in. The windshield is busted out. The airbags have gone off. The people out there were talking. I can't tell you what they were saying, if it was men or women. My adrenaline was pumping so hard that I went and sat in the driver's seat. And when I went to go get out of the car, there was a police officer standing there. He had his gun pointed at me. And he asked me whose car it was. I said it was mine. Legally, it was my car. It was in my name because Brandon was deployed. So I was like he was like the co, and I was the lead on the loan. They then took me and put me in the back of a police car down the road. For what seemed like an eternity. The windows had fogged up. I couldn't see out of them anymore. So finally, I got enough courage to start banging on the windows. A police officer came over and asked me what was wrong. I said, well, I need to go to the bathroom. He's like, well, you can't go back in your house. And he started to close the door, and I got brave and stuck my foot out. And then another police officer comes over, and he's like, what's wrong? He said, she has to go to the bathroom. And they're like, well, he said, well, take her to the fire station. So he takes me to the fire station. And when we go in, he tells me not to close and latch the bathroom door. So I go in there. I can hear him talking. I'm going to assume he was talking to a fireman. And he was telling him, we're not sure who did it, her or son, but one of them killed somebody. So when I came out, I'm like, what do you mean somebody killed somebody? And he's like, well, there's a police officer that knows you that's going to meet us at your house that's going to tell you what's going on. So I was like, okay. So as we're going back, we're heading west. There's another police car heading east. And they had me get out and go from one car to the other. And the police officer in the other car asked me if I knew who he was. I said yes. My dad had had an accident years prior. Not under the influence, but an accident. And this was the detective that handled my dad's accident. At this point, they bring Brandon out. They're trying to do field sobriety across the street from my house. I'm trying to tell the police officer who's in the car with me that Brandon wouldn't be able to do that if he was sober or drunk. It wouldn't make a difference. He wouldn't be able to do it. And because when he came home, he was 30% disabled in his back. So at that point, this police officer asked me if they can serve me a search warrant or do they need to. And I asked, well, where my husband was, because I wanted to talk to my husband. Um, and then, so they go in to search the house. As they're in there searching the house, my daughter starts yelling. And she was upstairs and she says, Mom, look outside, look outside. Well, when I look out there, they had taken Brandon for a drug and alcohol test at the hospital, a blood test, and now they've brought him back. And the police car opens up the back door, Brandon gets out, and he's like in his boxers, and the police officer walks away and lets like the news crew surround him. So I walk out the door and I start yelling and screaming because at this point, I still don't know exactly what happened. And even if I had known at that time, Brandon's still my child. So my priority at that point needed to make sure that he was okay and that we could figure out what we needed to do with him. So my husband's telling me, get inside the doorway, get inside the door and hold the screen door shut. You're going to get arrested. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you're going to get arrested. Well, as he's saying this, there's police officers coming towards the house. So I get inside the screen door, but my mouth does still keep going. And two police officers walk up, and one puts his foot up on the porch and says, how come every time something effed up happens, there's always a Mexican involved? And I was like, what? So I looked at him and I told him, hey, I don't know who you're looking at, but when we got up this morning, we both put our pants on the same way, buddy. Like, if you're going to take him to jail, take him to jail. Like, why are we still sitting here? So that's what they did. They took Brandon to jail. That was on Saturday. On Monday was Brandon's first arraignment. When we went to court, his bail was $5,000 cash, which I had to borrow from my grandparents because I didn't have it. And then Brandon went to work that night because he was worried about losing his job. He worked with his dad, so him and his dad went to work. About halfway through the shift, his dad called and said that I needed to come and pick him up because the news crews had showed up, or news people had shown up at the job, and that they terminated Brandon because he was within his 90 days. So I went and picked him up. The next day, we started trying to figure out what we were going to do, get Brandon in some drug and alcohol classes, look for an attorney, try to figure out, what our next move should be. I think in the beginning that the felonies that Brandon was charged with equaled up to 20 to 40 years. At this point is the first time we had any interaction with Mr. Grant's family, which at this point we were like, I was terrified of it, but I don't think Brandon was as much so as I was. We started, I think the first person we hung out with was Mr. Grant's widow. We had coffee with her. We went and talked. She tried to have Brandon talk to some other veterans who had some issues. And then I think, I'm not exactly sure what the family asked for, but 9 months, I'm not exactly sure what it was called, but 9 months, it took everything to go through court, and there was more than one sentencing, and then at the last sentencing, the judge decided that she wanted to take a look at what she could have Brandon do, because the family's intention was to give Brandon to get a sentence that was like restorative and not just like, hey, this is what we're going to do to you, and then you come out and you're still the same person. They wanted him to be better. So Judge Miller gave him 12 years. He ended up having to do 6 of the 12, but his first year was in Dukem Center. So he lived there for a year. And then he came home on house arrest for 2 years. And then he was on probation for 3 years. And then one of his unique things about his sentence was that Judge Miller wanted him to remember the gift that he was given. So she sentenced him to 30 days a year for 3 years in the county jail. So when you go to Dukem Center, they have to, if you don't have a job, they help you find a job. So the job that Brandon took with them, he wasn't making enough money to basically pay for everything that he had to pay for. So when he went and did his first 30 days and he was going to come home on house arrest, he ended up getting a different job so that he could afford to take over some stuff for himself, like the house arrest payment, which I think he paid $110 a week to be on house arrest. Dukem Center cost me a little more than $500 a month for the year that he was there. Brandon's attorney cost me more than $12,000 that I had to take a loan out on my 401k to pay for. And the reason why I talk about the money is because by the time everything is said and done, if this would have just been like where Brandon wouldn't have gotten any trouble or anything like that, all the money that I used, I could have put a down payment on a house for him. I could have bought him a brand new car. Not to mention how much it affects other people in the family. This has now been more than a decade. I have a daughter who's going to be 31, and the year that she was, or 30, the year that she was supposed to get her license was the same year the accident happened. So she's always been very scared to drive. So finally getting her to a point where she can drive is a big relief on me, because she has 3 kids, so I don't have to go to every doctor's appointment. The job that Brandon got after he came home on house arrest is the same job that he has to this day. So he's been there a little over 10 years. Brandon now has 2 daughters that are like 6 and 2. And I have to really say that anybody who's ever met Brandon knows that Brandon is a good guy. He did not do this intentionally. He did not have a reason to go out and want to hurt anybody else. If anything, he was going to hurt himself. And the fact that this happened, in a weird way, it's kind of probably not for the Grant family, but for my family, it's, even though I wish it could have changed of how everything happened, but it's had to have been a blessing because of the things that now Brandon finds is more like he's not interested in drinking. He's not interested in hanging out. He hasn't been for years. I'm not going to say that he never drinks. When he could, so that if he did want to go on tailgate, that he could drink because he could walk home, which in hindsight I think is pretty good for him, because that was his thing, going to the Notre Dame tailgates. I could say like Brandon used to do the Victims Impact with us for a lot of years, and then he just didn't think people were listening. I can remember we went to a 4th of July party at my nephew's house, and a guy came up and asked Brandon, "Hey, you want a beer?" And Brandon's like, "No." And he said, "Well, because I know you from somewhere." And then Brandon's like, "Yeah, I recognize you too. You were at Victims Impact last month." So he just got in his head that people weren't listening, and that he just needed to be able to move on with his life. But here we are more than a decade later, and we're still trying to make a difference. And one thing that I can tell you is that, and I get this from Mrs. Grant, is that you need to show everybody grace. We don't know what other people are going through. I don't know what you're going through. You don't know what I'm going through. And sometimes we just need to extend grace to others, so that so that they can feel like, hey, I can do better, or things can get better. I guess the one final thing that I would have to say for everybody is, this is coming from a mom. Hindsight's 2020. I thought about for years the way I could go if things would have been different. Would I have done this? Would I have done this to make it not happen? But I still love Brandon. I still think that he is a great guy. But this one thing that he has to live with for the rest of his life. Little story. I had my grandson when he was 3. Went and got him a little Ninja Turtle watch from his little Happy Meal. And he comes in and asks me, Nana, you put my watch on? I said, yeah, and I'm getting it out of the package. And I look over and he's sticking up his ankle. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I want to wear my watch like Uncle Bub because of the house arrest bracelet. I can tell you Brandon never left the house with shorts on the whole time, the whole 2 years he was on house arrest. And it's just amazing that a kid would think that that is something else. Everybody in my family knows who the Grant family, the relatives in Grant's family are. My grandsons and all my grandkids know Sherry. So I just feel very thankful of the outcome that had happened. And I can remember last year when we were doing the Victims Impact Program and we were walking out and Sherry went to introduce me to somebody, and I thought, oh great, they're gonna look at me like, oh, this is Brandon's mom. And that's not what she said. She said, this is Stacey and she's my friend. And that like really touched my heart, because we all think that we have friends until something happens, and then when something bad happens, they judge you or talk about you or whatever the case may be. And that has never been the way I feel when I'm around the Grant family. I don't feel judged or like I'm a bad person or a bad mother. Sherry has never made me feel like I was a bad mother. And I can tell you that if something was to happen to me today, I truly believe that Sherry would check on my kids. She would make sure that they were okay. She would really watch out for Brandon. And what else can you expect from somebody who truly is your friend but to do those things for you? Okay, I'm done.